to step forward.
I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
I didn't answer.
Hello, everyone.
I won't answer it.
Hello, everyone. This is Captain Diesel, Lelouch V, Professor E, King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy, and
you're listening to the Then and Now podcast.
Thank y'all for coming in. Thank y'all for returning to see another episode. We are here to discuss a very interesting piece of media that we have consumed, that I have indoctrinated my brethren here into watching. And we're going to talk about it today, that being Griselda. But before we do so, my brothers, how are you doing? How go things?
Things go. They stop. Okay, I'm doing okay. Today's a Tuesday, even though it's a Monday. Or is it a Tuesday? I'm losing track of days. It's Tuesday. It's not a Tuesday.
Old niggas, man. They be losing track of time, space, their names. It's crazy.
I'm actually older than they segue. The segue. I see what you did there. You cozy little bastard. I'm good, man. I'm living out here. I'm doing that right. You see when he's all wrapped up, like you can't even see his ears all snug up against his head bone. I'm good, man. It's raining out here. It is literally flooding out here where our producer and I are for some reason.
Anyway, Griselda, guys.
Griselda, yes.
Yeah, Griselda.
This was a show that I saw mostly because I'm a big fan of Sofia Vergara. She is one of my favorite actresses to watch. I just think she has a really cool and outgoing personality. She's one of those people that, like, she just pops in whatever she's in. She may not be like the best actor in that, but whenever she's there, I don't know if it's the energy, her in general, but she pops to me on screen. And I watched a lot through all of Modern Family. I binged that, Soul Plane, or whatever she's been in. I think she was in the Machete movies as well. So I was interested in watching this, and I got a lot more than I expected. I knew that she was a decent actor. I didn't know she had this in her. But before I gush on it, what were your guys' thoughts in general on the series when you first initially watched it?
I thought it was really good too. Yeah.
Oh, you go first. You first.
Okay. Yeah, I was because what brought me into it was you mentioned some people that I work with had talked about it too. They were asking, "Has anybody seen Griselda? Has anybody seen Griselda?" And I hadn't yet, and then you brought it up as well, so I went ahead and checked it out, and you can tell pretty much like a few minutes into the first episode, oh, that's what we're getting. That's the gear we're in. This isn't meant to be a vanity piece. This is very much I am in the vein of Scarface and very much Narcos and Snowfall. It is like, in order to be the top dog in this arena, you have to be able to bite. And see Sofia Vergara bite like this, because even in Modern Family, there are times that it shows that she's actually, when she's popping off about certain things, that she can go there in some way. She always has been able to. But this one it's just that she's not trying to be the prom queen. She's very much like the junkyard dog in a lot of ways.
Even in it, I think like the makeup, like her makeup, because I don't think I've seen her on I forget what like talent shows she's like a host on right now. She still looks rather kind of youthful in like her skin, but it looked like in the makeup here they like aged her up a little bit more to make her look a little bit more grittier and not as like beautiful. I guess like she's still a beautiful woman, but like she didn't like pop off the screen as like this glowing woman like normally that you see her in most of. But in this one, it was like, all right, gritty to the bone.
Well, because she had that nose prosthetic. So that nose prosthetic did kind of like throw me off for a while, because I could tell it wasn't her real nose, only because I know what she really looks like. But after a while, you get kind of used to that. And look at pictures of the real Griselda. I don't know if her nose was necessarily needing a prosthetic anyways, but whatever. They made some choices.
Lelouch?
Yeah, I mean, this is one that I was planning on skipping initially. Not because I thought it was going to be bad, but I've kind of, I've seen a lot of this type of content recently. Between like Narcos, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. This drug. I try to have seasons away from it, but this was what I worth diving into. Sofia Vergara always has a lot of personality when she's on screen, but I mean, her being a centerpiece like this and something grittier as opposed to like something comedic like she's done in the past, it definitely showed her range. She was compelling through the whole way through. Like seeing her accent used so aggressively as opposed to like like comedically, like how she kind
Mhm.
of plays around with it in her other roles. It was definitely interesting. She was intimidating to a degree. I understood why she was able to amass what she did. She was ruthless.
Yeah.
I think that's the funny thing too. You mentioned there is like the use of like her beauty and her accent. Like you said, everything else. Those are the two things that is abused in a comedic way, and like you said before, this is used in like a very ruthless way where it's like, okay, she's pretty. That's said throughout the episodes multiple times throughout the script, and her act. I enjoy film and shows where they can use the native language of the characters to progress the plot in places where it makes sense as well. Because if somebody that's an English speaker, I didn't ever feel like they were just using Spanish at a certain point in time just to use it for set dressing, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like in the moments they would use it made a lot of sense, especially in those moments where you see it a lot and a lot of stuff now where like it'll be an English speaking person that seems like a bigot and they'll use Spanish to like make fun of that person because obviously they don't speak Spanish, all that good stuff. But I have a lot of great things to say about this show, but so I'm not going to gush on it right now. But we'll break it down piece by piece. What I want to speak on first is the historical context of it. So for anyone that isn't aware, this is a biopic. Well, it's not a pic; it's a series, but like a bio series about a real woman from the '80s, or the cocaine cowboy era, where if you're not aware, during that point in the '80s, there is the stuff going on with Fidel Castro, where a lot of the Cubans pretty much tried to escape the island, escape Cuba, and they all fled their way into Florida, which is, again, if you go to Florida now, you'll see a lot of big Cuban inspiration and food and culture there because of this, because there's a huge import of them coming in. And during this eras when cocaine was really moved really prevalently, and there's a specific scene that I've talked to Otis about, I think before we got to this review, where it's one of the assassination scenes. They took, because it was on a news, a real event that happened in the news where there's an assassination that happened at this gas station, and they dressed these characters up very similarly, if not exactly down to the T, like the people in this news clipping, and like recreated that assassination essentially. And if you're a little bit of a historian, I guess, for lack of a better term, or you just know the history of drugs in America and how that's worked out, I just thought it was really dope that they paid that much attention to detail with like down to dressing these people down to exactly how these real life people looked. Because I went back and like rewatched footage of it as well myself just to be like I was kind of enamored with it. But did you guys find any like historical context? Were you guys aware of any of the historical context before you watched it?
I mean, I was aware that she was a large part of how cocaine was introduced to America, but I mean
Mm-hmm.
the actual like history of like the crimes down to the the clothing I was never really aware of, but I do feel that like I mean if you're getting millions of dollars to put into a project, you should pay that much attention because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what else are you doing?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. That makes
I,
sense too. Yeah.
you go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I was agreeing with you. Yeah, if you have them, if you have that kind of a budget, might as well do something with it. Why not do some
Mm-hmm.
research? And yeah, it makes perfect sense. Even with the idea too of what I had seen before this was just Michael Corleone, the youngest surviving son. Spoiler alert. How he's still popping off and talking about things online with the show and everything else too pertaining to his family. So yeah, he's still
Mm-hmm.
around. I had seen that before, and you get a chance to
Right.
see him actually as a kid in this show.
And I'm
One
not
thing
sure
that I thought
how.
actually was really, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was. I'm not sure how 100% accurate stuff was, but yeah, that was all I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I'll say one thing that was interesting, and I looked it up. This actually was supposedly a quote from there's a quote at the very beginning of the show, which kind of hooked me in, bizarrely enough, right off the top, where it just says the only man I ever feared was a woman named. Because it actually says the only man I ever feared space was a woman named Griselda space,
Mm-hmm.
and then the space then it says uh, Pablo Escobar. I was like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, she has a that's a pretty bizarrely enough like a ringing endorsement from on the top, like drug lords of all time. And watching the
Mm-hmm.
series unfold, it's like, oh, okay, I can see why when she orders the hits on like all kinds of people, I can see A, why she named her son Michael Corleone, and B, why she was feared by so many people in the drug game.
So let's go down the just the different pieces of the show in general. Um, and one thing I want to look at is like the descent into madness, literally, to some extent, with this character. So obviously, you see Griselda initially. She's not in the. I'm not gonna say like happy or bubbly, but or even innocent because she'd been moving drugs for a good little bit at this point in the show. But she definitely seemed a lot more like vanilla of a person versus how the show ended. And I enjoyed the progression and the character development to the descent and the madness that we got from her. Do you guys feel like that was warranted or like done at a good pace? Do you feel like there anything outstanding moments to you in her development that you wanted to point out?
Uh, I think it was done at a solid pace. I mean, you put enough person in enough high pressure situations, it's going to be a matter of time before they are affected by it. And she can. I mean, literally in the first episode, she appears on her friend's doorstep with a gunshot wound and a brick of coke, which gets robbed. And like she has to go through a whole everything to get that back, and it just kind of progresses further and further from there, all the way to like, I think the final breaking point was when I can't remember. I think Mario was his name. I can't remember his name.
The bodyguard.
Yeah, the bodyguard came
Mario.
with her husband's brother, and like had them strung up in their hotel room, getting ready to kill him. I mean, I feel like that's when she kind of really hit her head of ruthlessness, where like like she seemed hesitant about like hurting women and children before then. After that, it was just kind of like, you in my way, you got to go. There will be no opposition, and she executed that, and pretty much at her whim, she could switch from being in a peaceful conversation to getting out a golden Uzi and lighting up a car. So.
yeah, that was the seed of seed right there. That's the symbolism right there, the metaphor of using a golden gun to blast holes all up in someone. Was that a caddy? It wasn't a caddy. It was
like a Cadillac, I think.
I think it was a caddy. Yeah,
it may have been a caddy. But
where do you even get that made in the 80s? Where do you get a golden gun that's fully functional?
That's the thing. Because the thing is, gold, for those who don't know, gold is heavy and expensive. So to fire, I'm not sure there were golden bullets, but I was like, this is still a lot. This is a lot of a lot. It wasn't his name. Was it Dario? Her spoiler. Her husband wasn't his name Dario with a D.
It's Dario or Mario, one of the two.
Dario is okay. I can't remember which one. But yeah, that cat. The thing was, the descent into madness that you're describing wasn't too slow, because like you said, she started off on her back heels. She already started off like very extremely determined, and because she grew up in before we kind of the backstory of the character, which she was, I don't know how many years she was in was a sex worker, and clearly a sex worker in Colombia wasn't treated well at all. So we don't know all the abuse she had to suffer from that. Her husband was highly abusive towards her, tried to literally sell her off to pay off his debts. And she already had 3 kids from I'm not sure how many different fathers. So she had been through some life. She had been through some life as it was. But she was a survivor. And to survive at all, even before that kind of a game, takes a lot of a person. So as she got further into the game, one of the biggest turning point for me, there were 2 major turning points I thought in the series. The first was, again, spoilers for the show, was when she turned down, was it $50 million? She was trying to get bought out by another kingpin, I believe from Colombia as well.
Yeah, from Colombia. Yeah.
So Colombia
too. Almost at the whales, the Osilas, or it's something. I'm like the names now.
Because it was that dude that ends up being like their kind of a partner for a while in a sense. And she turned it down. And this is again in the early '80s, and she $50 million is like what? And she turned it down because she wanted to have her own empire, which is kind of, it's not just so much greed also as it is your own sense of pride. You want to make your own empire, so to speak. And another thing too was after that, when she ordered the hit on Ochoa, was it? No, that can't be wrong. It can't be Ochoa. It was a dude that she'd originally founded, as far as like who had been her original bodyguard way back in the day.
Was it Chewy? Not Chewy.
Chewy. Man, I feel bad. I'm sorry. I can't remember.
We are bad at this today.
We are really bad at this. Yeah.
I
can see our British.
I watched this like a week or 2 ago. These guys are more refreshed, so I'm blaming them. I'm putting them on the cross.
I pretty much binged as bad as I could at like 1 a.m. over and over again. But it was a dude that she originally hired to back her up as her bodyguard when she did her original deal. So he had been with her since the beginning, essentially. And she pretty much ordered the hit on him because she kind of thought maybe he had done something wrong, but he did strike her son, but she thought, oh, he has to be a narc. He has to be the one talking to the police. And her, she sent somebody over there to do it. While she was high, off her mind. Luckily enough, he kind of failed, but he did end up doing something else, killing somebody else. But it just showed how far she had gone. She's going to kill off anyone and everyone. She's talking to her best friends at her party, using a golden Uzi on caddies. Is like, so those are the biggest, like, oh, she's doing
Define the 10 crack commandments, because Biggie clearly said never get high on your own supply.
Well, when her supply, that was crack. She was doing coke. She was selling coke. The homegirl was like, "Hey, you want to smoke this crack?" And I was like, "No,
It's a byproduct of her coke."
That's. I'm good. I'm good. I was wondering about that too. It's like, how on earth did she manage to have? There's no reality when she had 9 months while she was pregnant with Michael Corleone and not like doing a whole bunch of drugs. How does that kill Kay? Is he okay?
I don't think she did any, because I don't think at that point she wasn't desperate enough, because she even took the crack because it was like, hey, relax, your anxiety is too high, you're overthinking things. She was like, you know what, cool, let me try to calm down. Everybody else is doing this. Let me hit this crack real quick. At least to my knowledge. I hope. I didn't see her, because again, I don't think when she was pregnant with him, I don't think she had a lot of the supply anyway like that until. Because if I remember correctly, that's when they were still in like the stash house with Dario and still trying to like build.
Right. Yeah, they were.
And by the time she had him, they were already like established. So maybe she did it. Well, I don't know. But if we want to try to figure out why he wasn't the penguin from Schumacher stuff, that's why. What I want to speak on really quickly. Is the development. It's something that you talk a lot about, Ethan, as far as building up this character when they're not on screen. I thought having Dario go back to the brothel in which she used to work at and speak to other prostitutes that worked alongside her back in the day was brilliant, and how they had those prostitutes talk about her in regards to her ambition, her intelligence to learn how to do something. I think it was she learned how to clean money or something of the sort to get out of there. And how how one of the prostitutes was jealous of whatever. I thought that was amazing, because you got to establish something foundational about this character without them being around. And I felt like that was sprinkled throughout the series of like different instances where she wouldn't be on screen, but side characters would have conversations about her and about her intelligence, her cunning, her ambition. And even when you see her on screen and you know the character and it's been established, I feel like it just added more and more layers to her without even having to have her say anything. And I thought that was really well done and something that was consistent throughout the show.
Yeah, that was really good too. I mean, like you said, mentioned going back into her backstory with the sex workers, they were talking about that kind of stuff. But even another side of that too was how, like I mentioned, the opening quote from the very top when you have Pablo Escobar saying, "The only person I prefer was this one person." There is also this is kind of it's not a two-hander, but they have like two parallel storylines. They have the storyline, of course, with Griselda, our drug dealer. Then on the other side of the coin, we had the female FBI agent. I think her name was, I can't remember, was it Marta? I can't remember her name was now, but she was basically trying to run down Griselda. And so because she was the only one who could understand what it's like to be a woman in a extremely male dominated field, she was able to kind of see through some of the BS and kind of figure out that Griselda was a top player, bizarrely enough. And so seeing her be like the way she was describing her, talking her up was like, yeah, it's better even more. It's like, you understand what it's like to be like, to actually stand out or survive in this game, you have to be either crazy or extremely powerful. And so so hearing a Fed talk about someone like that, it builds up more like you said, more street cred too, in a sense.
Others?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you should do when you're trying to build a mythos around a character. You should have, like, them respected amongst their peers and their enemies, and find ways to highlight that in the series. I mean, it's what Naruto did with Madara. It is what I'm trying to think. I mean, that's what Jujutsu Kaisen does with Sukuna. I mean, it's how you set up a intimidating character by showing these other characters of influence or power or whatever, depending on the story, that also respect or fear this character.
Yeah.
Now, really quickly, I want to dive into the side characters. We talked about her a lot, and I think we'll get back into her in a little bit, but I do want to expound upon the side characters really quickly, because for me as well, I think the side supporting cast make the show, in my opinion, with how a lot of them interact with her and how a lot of them react to a lot of the actions she has. Mainly her husband Dario. I'm pretty sure it's Dario. I believe.
Yeah, there's a D. I'm looking up.
Yeah, we'll check it in post. Editor Cito, let us know.
Yeah.
But him in particular, and a lot of the other characters, they not only they didn't feel like they were obviously like plot devices to an extent, but they also had their own backstory that they like. It was really interesting because I'm like, how do you develop her so much and spend so much time saying who she is, but then somehow also simultaneously give a good bit of backstory and develop the side characters to where you're alluding to a long history of past that they had doing fucked up stuff. Um, Especially with Dario, where they mentioned like him not killing her kids because he's like, yeah, I never had to do that before, or I killed a lot of people. I'm like, it do like subtle comments in conversation with her, and that would happen with other characters where they'd be in conversation with her, say something subtly, but in that subtle comment, it would build up a lot of that character. You kind of got a insight into the brain of that person. And that's one thing I will say about this film. If I had to give it a characteristic, was efficiency. They would say use so little words and so little scenes to establish so much. Because initially, when I saw this, I'm like 6 episodes is kind of short to run through a whole series, isn't it? And I feel like they didn't waste a single second.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
mean
mean,
that's what you
yeah.
could do with effective dialogue, cough MCU, when you're not trying to insert like jokes into every other sentence. You can actually
Mm-hmm.
like give descriptions of the world and people, and like not have the whole cracking jokes in a gladiatorial arena. Um, I just
He
feel
had it
like, I
going.
mean, that's what you're supposed to do when you are trying to again establish a mythos within a world of like showcasing a queen pin in action. Like you don't have to like let's waste a scene of them going to the beach and frolicking and having a nice family day. Like that's not what this story is for. This is a gritty story about a drug dealer and gun runner that lost her mind in a world that was already pretty vicious. And I appreciate the efficiency as well.
Funny enough,
Ironically
they still
enough,
had the frolicking beach scene. Yeah.
it literally,
Yeah, no.
it literally had that exact scene, and they went back to it while she was in prison. She thought about it again the second
Mhm.
time. That's right. Ironically enough, they had that. Yeah, I think it's what you were describing more or less, more so than as opposed to bashing a Thor Ragnarok, is the idea of being on like staying on point or staying on like staying true to form with your characters. Obviously, Griselda wasn't popping off with jokes. It doesn't mean they weren't lighthearted moments in the series. It just means that wasn't her
Mm.
character. That wasn't the kind of world she was in. It wasn't kind of series we're depicting with her. And the cop, the Fed, was named June. It was named June.
June. Okay.
That was the one that was after her from pretty much from square one. Uh, so yeah, it's I think that it is very, as far as characters go, the side characters were a very instrumental part of this world because it was fun to watch the people that I don't think Griselda ever feared anyone really. She was afraid for her kids at one time earlier, but I don't think she
Mm-hmm.
herself ever feared anyone. But it was fun to watch those that had power over her um, end up serving her, be the ones that at her birthday party found that
Mm-hmm.
the zenith of her power at her birthday party, seeing so many people that had given her a hard time before that were there pretty much serving her in a way, and then also again seeing her in a lot of ways who was her original best friend in Carmen, who had supported her, who had been the actual haven for her when coming into Miami when she was coming from Colombia. To see her try to choke her out, to see that whole relationship break apart too. All these things were instrumental or kind of incremental into her, or just her rise and fall, so to speak.
Mm. I want to expound upon the beach stuff. I know Otis brought it up as a joke, but there's something that was done incredibly well, in my opinion, was taking scenes. So you see it in a lot of well done films where they will take a situation and attach a positive and negative connotation on it depending on where you are in the film. And for this one, in the very beginning, throughout the entire film, it was like this weird Dutch angle. Well, maybe using maybe not the Dutch angle, but where she'd be placed in like the bottom right half of the camera, and she would always be smoking a cigarette and looking up at some sort of window. Initially, in the beginning of the show, I took that as again, she's looking up to higher aspirations or whatever else, the future. And then at the end of the series, it was her looking out the prison cell window with a cigarette. and she would just kind of look at it and make a gesture with the cigarette. I don't know if there's a deeper meaning behind that motion or that shot that I'm missing. I want to do some research to kind of look it up because I couldn't find anything on it upon my initial lookup of it. But that was one, and then the second one was that beat scene that Otis brought up.
But what did that mean to you, though? The idea, because essentially, I know the exact thing you're talking about as far as her sitting back and kind of essentially drawing with the cigarette, like almost drawing a frame or whatnot. But what did that mean? To you?
For again, like to me, like I said earlier, I think initially it looked like a whole thing of like because it was in the beginning of the show, it was always up. She would always be looking up to a second story window. So again, I'm like, all right, cool. She's looking up the higher aspirations, the goals, and whatnot. And by the end of the show, it was her just looking out this one jail cell window. There's got to be something I'm missing there, whether it be in like her journaling or maybe her son's testament about her, because it was that and that gesture. Because it was very specific, like she was casting a Harry Potter spell with the cigarette and the smoke. And I couldn't tell if she was like drawing a heart or I don't know. Maybe I have to look at it again to see in particular. But I found that very interesting. And I love when directors do that. I don't know if it's something that of the vision of the director in particular, or again, like I said before, I don't know if it's something that was in her journal or something of the sort, but it was something that caught me while I was watching it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was taking that moment as things coming full circle, right? Like at the beginning, she was coming into this to build a safe place for her family. And in the end, her ambitions and her relationships with people and how she treated people during that time ended up getting her family killed. So it was like I came all the way around to here. Like I tried to protect you and hurt you in the process. That's what I got from it, at least.
Yeah, I mean, and that's in that very real sense. She was the one, of course, who damned them. She was architect of their own demise because they tried to go in the drug game, and all three of them got except for Michael Corleone, who was basically spared. And as far as the cigarette drawing, how I interpreted that, especially by the end, was that she was basically trying to draw the image of her, framing her perfect dream, or suppose what she wanted. So she was drawing the house, a frame around the house. That was kind of what she wanted with her family in it. Then later on the beach, she's drawing, because it's a part even at her birthday party, she's like drawing a frame around like the whole party itself. At the beach, she's drawing a frame around her boys, and at the very end, she's in the prison cell. She's just drawing a frame around just the window outside, looking out into the outside of the prison itself. Like that's all I have now is this one with this small, very narrow frame. So that's what I imagine. She's always looking towards her dream, so to speak, whatever it might be, whatever she has left. And in the end, she destroys it. I don't know if that's actually what it was. I'm not even sure that's real, but that's how I interpreted it. Again, it's one of those things that's meant to be a little ambiguous as far as up to the viewer. How they see it.
That makes a lot of sense though with the framing aspect, because it looked like she was, like you said, it was capturing moments almost. Like each one of the times she would do that at the end of the episode, would be like a snapshot of where she was in life.
Right.
So yeah, that would make sense to me. I had to look back to see if just like she's drawing like a frame, or if I thought it looked like she was like drawing a word or something in my mind, but I digress. And the second thing I wanted to get on in regards to that same token was the beach scene, obviously, with the first time this happening is like, again, a moment of like triumph, I guess, and success with like all of her sons celebrating at the beach. She's kind of relaxing and she's taking the moment in. And then at the end where it's just, she's remembering that memory and like you see all her children fade away. And it was kind of saddening. Like to Otis's point, everything came full circle. And a lot of the times I think when we hear that phrase, it's in a positive connotation, but for this to be like, yeah, all your sins caught up with you at the end of this film, even more so to the end where I thought it was amazing well done. Again, this could have just been how things happen in real life, which I think it was, but I thought it was very poetic in a sense to where, okay, yeah, we're not going to fuck with your kids now, but we're going to wait for the day you get out of prison and take everything from you. And I was like, damn. I sat there like when that happened, I'm like, oh yeah, she won. Because at a certain point, I'm rooting for her to win throughout the whole film. And when it got to the end, I'm like, yeah, she got all them niggas. She outsmarted everybody. And at the end, I'm like, fuck, that's tough. And the crazier thing was they let her live even more. Because I think at the very end, they say she died at 69. So she lived like another 10, 11 years. They let her like live her life without her children and go through heartbreak. And then randomly got rid of her when they were done with her. They were fed up. So I was like, damn, that's tough.
Well, it's even
while she was
weirder
getting groceries.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, she's got to get a grub on. Another thing that's weird too, you got to remember this, Charlie, is that she when they were at the beach and she was in that frame, that wasn't in happier times. That was after they were on the run. After they had already left, they were fleeing because they had done all that crazy stuff. They had killed off, or old boy's wife had overdosed and fallen on that glass table, and she knew that she was going to get the heat for that. So they had already run, and they had gone like they'd gone to California one night, or living in a little crappy apartment. So when they were on the beach, the way I took that was the idea that, oh, she kind of realized she could have had that a long time ago, as far as just her and her sons in a peaceful life. It was something that Dario said at her birthday party too. Like, what are we doing? Why are we still doing all this madness? We can just have a life. Why don't just you, me, and the boys go off somewhere else, leave all this behind? And so she kind of saw that, yeah, I could have had this. I could have just had a nice, peaceful life with my boys. Otis mentioned Breaking Bad before. In Breaking Bad, there's that the delusion of the lie that Walt has for a long time, that he's doing all this for his family, and he's able to get his family settled for pretty early on in the series, and he gets to the point where he's just doing all this stuff just for himself, for his own greed and glory and pride. Griselda was in the exact same camp. She was doing so much stuff. She kept saying, "I'm doing this for my boys, I'm doing this for my boys," and she was lying through her teeth. It was always for her own glory and own power. So, yeah,
I saw it. The only reason I saw it as a happier time because that was when she was big on like, we're going to start over again. We're going to get a new start. And if I remember correctly, that's when her confidant had successfully sold the cocaine at that point.
Yeah.
Before he got the call, because he successfully sold it. They had the flashback, and then he got the call saying that Buddy was in LA looking for him.
Right.
And he called her real quick. And that's
because you're right. It is a happier time. It is a happier time. Yeah, it could have been a permanent happy time.
In Charlie's defense, though, any time is a happier time than the day that find out your children were all murdered. So,
yeah, that's brutal. That's brutal.
FTK, man. That was man. The series can we get into some of the production aspects of it when it comes to set design, costuming. Obviously, I'm not going to get too much into costumes. I'm not a tailor at all, or like a cosplayer, so I can't speak on the quality of a lot of that stuff. But this felt like the 80s for me, or the 80s/70s, especially after watching the series like Winning Time recently and seeing a lot of the 80s aesthetics that they put into that. I felt a lot of that brought back here as well when it comes to like the media and how the media was covered, how some of the perspective on women in particular, because that was a big thing too. Was like they did the women empowerment subplot without it being too overpowering, in my opinion. Because sometimes you have certain series or certain movies where they make that the key thesis of the thing of like, when I am woman, I am strong, I overcome. But they did this very subtly here, and part of it wasn't even with her; it was with the cop June, where the cop's doing weird shit, creepy shit, like turning the AC up so that her nipples are like poking out of her shirt. She's like doing her job to the best of her ability, and they're just not giving her the time of day or the attention on it. Mm-hmm. And you see her fight through and persevere through that to hunt down the woman who is persevering. And I again, to what you mentioned earlier in regards to the scene in which she's trying to like let everybody know, like, hey, I think this is a woman. They're like, woman able to do this shit. And she's like, it would make sense because you're not going to take her seriously for this reason, for one. And then two, I think she had a scene of like only a woman could be this, not this brutal, but I forgot what the exact words were, but she was really giving a lot of credit to like, yeah, this is women, the power women can have in the world. And I love that she used, because I will say this, and I'll ask a question here about how you guys feel about this. I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show before. Is a director or writers need to make sex appeal of a character and weaponize it so much? Because you'll see a character like a Black Widow, right, to where obviously she's very beautiful and attractive. Scojo's very attractive. And they make her, the femme fatale aspect of that character, like 90% of what makes them valuable and dangerous. And for me, I feel like that kind of devalues a character to an extent. I enjoy, I like use that because again, that's a realistic thing that women have the ability to do. But when you make that 90% of what makes this person relevant and effective in the world they're in, I don't know. I feel like it takes some away from that. I don't know how y'all feel about that in particular, but we never spoke about it, so I wanted to kind of get into it a little bit.
I see where you're coming from, and that it can devalue a character's abilities if you're saying the only value they have in a story or whatever the work of fiction is their sex appeal. Mm-hmm. But like you said, if they're able to use both men and women, if they are able to use their sex appeal to get further in their missions or to do well, to get information or to whatever it might be. Like James Bond, they always make sure, like for example, Daniel Craig, they made sure they showed a lot of shots of Daniel Craig with his shirt off and his abs rippling around all the place to make sure it was clear this guy slept with a lot of women to get what he wanted.
Right.
With femme fatales, that's a common trope as well. They use their sex appeal to get what they need from A, B, or C. In this series, it was interesting because clearly that wasn't what was happening. Both June and Griselda, their feminine wiles didn't help them at all. They worked against them. I mean, like you said before, the dude who literally stole old girl's brick of coke and punched her in the gut. It's like, yo, that is everything going wrong for her that day. So it is interesting when especially when women in male-centric worlds or empires have to use nothing but their brains and their brawn, whatever the brawn they might have, to try to get ahead, and are able to do so. When they prove they have to go, they have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and still do so. That is inspiring too.
Alusha, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just believe that if you are a writer or director that can only highlight the sex appeal of your female characters, then you aren't that good at what you do. You don't have the ability to showcase the nuance and make this person an actual person or a character. You just see what is on the surface, and you should probably get replaced at your job.
Michael Bay. Oh, my bad. I was
Yeah.
sit there.
Yeah.
Because part of it, let's be honest too, though, we're all anime fans here, and obviously the fan service, they do a lot in anime.
It's the big reason why I hate Fairy Tail the way that it does, because it has like actual female characters that they could do something with. Instead, they decide to just show side boob.
Yeah.
Urza has side boob. Urza was still kicking that.
But she always had to get rescued by Natsu, man.
We're not gonna do this today.
Yeah, we don't have time for this today. I think it depends on how you wield it. I mean, obviously, for example, in wrestling, it can be a very sexy, powerful person. It's part of your power. Shouldn't define your power. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to just really quickly expound upon what you said earlier, as far as like her feminine wiles didn't work. And a lot of it, like when in the beginning of the show, whenever she would try to utilize that to like seduce a man into like, hey, you want to try this coke and get a little bit of this, it always backfired on her. Rather her coke getting stolen, or one of the, I think the initial crime boss was like, look, you're attractive, I get that. This guy's stupid. That's not gonna work for me.
He literally says that. Look, I get that. It's not gonna work on me. I'm not those Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Yeah.
So you sort of just like totally switch up her approach, where I'm not going to appeal to your the Neanderthal part of your brain. I'm going to appeal to the logic part of your brain, because obviously men think very logically in how some men at least think very logically in how we move. So like it went from her trying to appeal to his head, and I was like, okay, that's very. I found that very compelling, to where you turn a traditional trope kind of on its head, but you also still acknowledge the fact this is Sofia Vergara we're talking about. And I don't care how old she is, she's still gonna be fine as hell. And they mentioned that in the show a lot. I'm like, yeah, she's pretty attractive, but she's also very cunning, and I appreciated that. There's a lot about this show that I appreciate. Part of why I love the show so much could be because it was a change of pace for what I was watching. I know, to Otis's point, he watched a lot of shows similar to this up until this point. I didn't watch too many. I watched Narcos a little bit. I haven't watched Breaking Bad yet. I definitely haven't seen a single episode of Better Call Saul.
Have you seen Snowfall?
Worth it.
Snowfall. I've seen parts of it. I haven't watched the whole thing.
Worth it. Oh man.
Saul and Breaking Bad. But again, all these they're character studies too. They're character studies. I would even with Snowfall with Franklin Saint, they're all very much like what is, because that's what kind of makes it the appeal of these shows, or even just the real life people, is kind of like what is that makes someone like this. It gives them that kind of ambition, that kind of drive to knowingly plunge themselves into an extremely dangerous world for the idea of the possibility of becoming successful. Like what could drive you to do that? Because oftentimes these people are very, very smart people. With Griselda's case, she didn't have the resources to get ahead originally, but then she was offered $50 million to leave, and she still stuck around. Franklin Saint had plenty of options. He was a very smart kid. In Snowfall, Walter White had made it big and got rid of his cancer. No, spoiler alert. So I mean, what is it that keeps people compelled to stay in this game when they don't have to?
Yeah, I don't know. Usually, I try to stay. Usually, I stay away from a lot of the drug shows because a lot of them are like centered in black violence. So I'm just like, I don't. I'm kind of worried about that. I don't. That's why I don't watch too many like Juice or movies like that because I kind of get the secondhand trauma of just seeing black people be murdered over real life shit. This one, I was a little bit more willing to watch this one because it was a historical context on it. That's also part of what I love. I love the history of, especially America, and how wild shit happened here, and how that
Watch
went into
Snowfall.
developing regular society. But I'm gonna get Snowfall a chance soon. I'm gonna watch that. But what I want to give a little, I don't know if you guys have seen this series, but it's the exact opposite. It takes some of what made this show good, but did everything we just mentioned in the exact opposite way. A show called Weeds, where essentially it was
Oh,
something similar to where this mom is in a tough spot with her kids and she goes into selling drugs, but she literally get her her Deus Ex Machina is her coochie. Like whenever she's in a bad
oh.
situation and about to be murdered, she's sleeping with whoever's in the highest power and gets out of her situation. Hot ass
Uh,
sex scene, she gets away scot free. And that was the exact opposite here. It's like, yeah, whatever you would try to use that to get out of a situation, it didn't work. And in one instance where it was forced upon her, she still didn't want to do it, and it still didn't really work.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That set the tone in a way for this show was the idea of like sex is she views sex as essentially a step backwards. She's traumatized by it because of what happened.
mhm.
She made it very clear. I mean, that was the final straw. Essentially, she went to her husband saying and shot him because he forced her to sleep with her brother.
His brother.
I'm sorry, his brother. His brother. So
And
yeah,
you saw that in her relationship with sex. Whenever she would have, like, when she would have sex with Dario, who was somebody that was supposed to be her confidant, even then, like, he would mention, like, oh, she would, like, treat it like a thing to do. Which I'm not going to be the person to be like, oh, yeah, sex is this sacred bond between man and woman, but because some people view it that way. But I think it is a very intimate thing you do. And for the fact she treated it just like getting a massage or like somebody rubbing her feet, and I was like, damn, like she's very disconnected from it. But again, that goes back
yeah.
to the fact she had to use it as a means of survival at one point in time. So your relationship with it is kind of fucked up.
It was more transactional. He never left. Yeah, it was a
Mhm.
different relationship that she had with it. Yeah.
But sure, all in all, do you guys want to go ahead and get into the rating the show?
We can do both.
Unless you guys have anything in particular else you want to kind of deep dive into about the series.
No, not necessarily. It's like caveat to Weeds. I watched 15 minutes of that and turned it off immediately.
Yeah. But to get into the rating for the series, we can start with Lelouch. We'll start there and work our way back up to me. What are you giving this out of 10?
Out of 10, I'll probably give this a solid 8. Um, I thought, I don't think I had any particular complaints about it. After a while, I feel like I got numb to the trauma that they were trying to just showcase within her life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did enjoy seeing, like, I don't think it ended badly either, so I can't give a knockoff of that. But it didn't do anything that was like, pushing the scope of that type of content to new levels. So I can't give it higher than that. But I
Mm-hmm.
do think what it did well, and I highly recommend people watch it.
Yeah, I second that. I'd also give it an 8, just like it definitely did what it did well, but it didn't really break it, push any new boundaries. It was nice to see, obviously, female lead. It was historical in that regard too, but at the
Mm-hmm.
end, it was like the first, I think it was the first 4 episodes of building up so much as far as her ascent into becoming more of a queen pin. And then the last
Mm-hmm.
episode was kind of almost in a weird, same almost seemed kind of rushed, like it did a 3 year time gap, 3 year time jump. I'm sorry, time jump, and it kind of seemed rushed in a way at the end there. But I still very, very much enjoyed the ride. I very much enjoyed seeing. I can tell Sofia Vergara put everything she had into this role.
Mm-hmm.
It was bizarrely enough somewhat of an important story to tell. And I definitely enjoyed it. Like you mentioned before, Charlie, that you kind of just sat down, kind of just turned it on, and then you couldn't stop watching it. I was kind of in the same vein. I was very hyped for it. So
Yeah, I saw it. I was like, I'm just watch one episode tonight and then get ready for work the next day. 5 hours later, I'm like, I'm more than halfway through the series. I just could not stop watching it. And I'd probably give it a 9 for me. Granted, I think part of me is it's again, like I didn't watch all the other series that you guys watched, so I'm not maybe I'm not gonna say desensitized, but this is one of the first
Yes, it
things like
does.
this I've seen in this sense. So seeing this, seeing how efficient it was. Again, 6 episodes. Like if you tell me nowadays that I can make a show in 6 episodes, tell you your story I need to tell you, it's going to be clean, concise. I'm not going to overstay my welcome, and then show an extremely high level of attention to detail down to this minute detail of like clothing and situations and scenes. I'd say maybe like 3 of those shows would come out in the next 3 years, maybe, because I don't see them that often that are this efficient. So I'll probably give it a 9 for that, because I think I can. Anyone that has any kind of interest in a show like this, or even people that just like good stuff, I feel like I would recommend this to them, because I'm like, it won't take up too much of your time. It'll be good. It'll be efficient, and you'll see some great acting and great content all around. But
Yeah.
I digress.
And one last thing I'm going to say real quick. I think what drives me to watch these shows is the curiosity. Like, how is it possible? How is this? They always say that in writing, is opposed to the most important question, isn't who, what, where, when, or it's all about the how. How is this done? How is the magic to pull it off? We know that the main character's going to survive somehow. We know the main character's going to go from point A to point Z. It's the how they pull it off. So it's fun to see how did a woman in the late 70s, early 80s, when she was shot with 3 kids at the time, 3 kids, somehow managed to become a crime lord that rivaled Pablo Escobar. So,
Yeah, man. Also showed me never selling drugs ever again. I said ever again, like I've done it before. Never selling drugs in my life.
This isn't recorded.
Never selling drugs. Never selling drugs.
Good save, Charlie.
You can never, bro. Once you in the game, boy, you can never get out. I swear to God, you can never get out the game. You always looking over your shoulder. I'm cool. So yeah, please don't offer me drugs, people. I will say no.
Good save,
especially cocaine. But yeah, that's been the show, guys. Again, if you have any other sentiments about the show, if you agree with this, you think we're just totally wrong, let us know in the comments below. Again, our recording or show schedule every other week will be a live show, and we're going to be releasing these pre-recorded reviews or just videos about something in general in the weeks in between that as well. So if you guys have a particular show we want us to cover, even if it's older that we may not have seen or something newer, let us know in the comments below. Let us know on our social media platforms. I check those daily, constantly. So I'm looking forward for that to that interaction between our viewers. So let us know. This has been Lelouch V, Professor E King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy, and Captain Diesel. And
you're listening to the Then and Now podcast.
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Yeah. Subscribe to the channel. And this is what a show looks like when you're not just trying to make a cash cow, Disney.